Most people destroy attraction in the 10 minutes right after closeness and never even realize that's where they lost everything. Not because they did something wrong during the moment, but because they didn't understand what the brain is actually deciding after it. If this is hitting home right now, don't just watch, apply it. And if you want more psychology backed strategies like this, hit subscribe and stay connected. The next lesson will change how people respond to your presence forever. Most people believe emotional attachment is created in the peak moment of closeness, but psychology shows the opposite. The strongest bonding actually happens in the quiet minutes that follow, when the nervous system shifts from stimulation to reflection, and the brain decides what meaning to attach to the experience. During this window, the mind is no longer processing excitement. It is processing safety, significance, and emotional memory. And that is where long term attraction is either strengthened or quietly weakened, because the brain doesn't remember intensity as clearly as it remembers how regulated it felt afterward. If the atmosphere becomes anxious, needy, or rushed, the subconscious links the connection with pressure. But if the energy stays calm, grounded, and emotionally steady, the subconscious links the connection with peace, confidence, and security. And this is why people often feel more attached to someone who makes them feel emotionally safe than to someone who creates constant excitement. The 10 minutes after closeness act like an imprinting phase where emotional patterns are set, and those patterns silently guide future desire when someone remains composed instead of seeking reassurance, relaxed instead of over talking, present instead of demanding attention. It communicates something far more powerful than words. It signals self control, emotional strength, and inner stability. And the human brain is naturally drawn to those traits because they reduce uncertainty. People don't crave chaos, even if they think they do. They crave emotional regulation. This is why the absence of pressure becomes more magnetic than any attempt to impress. Because when someone feels no need to secure the moment, it makes the moment feel more valuable. The mind starts associating that presence with comfort rather than obligation. And over time, that comfort turns into attachment that feels natural instead of forced. The real influence is happening in silence, in body language, in pacing, in what is not said, because emotional memory is built from atmosphere, not actions. And whoever controls the emotional tone after closeness controls the way the connection is remembered, shaping how the other person feels long after the moment has passed. The human brain does not form deep attachment through excitement alone. It forms it through a sense of safety and calm, because safety tells the nervous system that it can relax instead of staying on alert. And when the nervous system relaxes, emotional bonding begins naturally. This is why people often feel closer to someone who makes them feel at ease than to someone who constantly creates emotional highs and lows. Excitement triggers adrenaline, but calm triggers oxytocin, the hormone responsible for trust, closeness, and long term connection, and this difference changes everything about how attraction develops. When someone brings emotional steadiness into a moment, they are telling the subconscious, you don't have to perform, defend, or impress here. You can just exist, and that feeling becomes rare in a world where most interactions feel like pressure, competition, or uncertainty. The brain remembers that rare feeling and starts associating it with the person who created it, not because of what they said or did, but because of how they regulated the emotional atmosphere. This is why calm confidence is more powerful than dramatic gestures, because drama keeps the mind stimulated, but calm keeps the heart open. When the energy stays grounded after closeness, it signals emotional maturity, self control, and inner stability. And those traits make people feel protected, rather than tested. Over time, the brain begins to crave that emotional environment the same way it craves rest after stress, not in a needy way, but in a natural pull toward what feels safe. This is the real reason why pressure kills attraction. Pressure tells the nervous system that something is wrong, that it needs to stay alert, and the moment someone feels alert instead of relaxed, bonding shuts down. But when someone feels emotionally held without being held tightly, connection deepens without effort. The mind doesn't label it as intensity, it labels it as peace, and peace becomes the foundation of lasting desire. Because what people ultimately return to is not who made their heart race the fastest, but who made their mind feel the calmest. And that calm becomes the emotional anchor that quietly strengthens attachment over time. Scarcity creates curiosity, but respect creates desire. And understanding the difference between these two is what separates short term attention from long term attraction, because curiosity is built on uncertainty, while desire is built on emotional value. When someone feels scarce, unavailable, or unpredictable, the mind becomes intrigued and starts chasing answers. But that chase is driven by anxiety, not connection. It's the same mechanism that makes people want what they can't easily have. Yet that feeling fades the moment clarity appears. Respect works differently. It doesn't rely on mystery, it relies on consistency, boundaries, and self worth. And the brain responds to that with something much deeper than curiosity. It responds with admiration, trust, and emotional investment. When someone carries themselves with calm confidence, doesn't overextend, doesn't beg for validation, and doesn't try to buy attention with effort, it sends a powerful signal of value, and the subconscious translates that as someone worth holding on to, not just someone worth figuring out. Curiosity pulls people in, but respect makes them stay, because respect makes the connection feel grounded instead of fragile. This is why people often feel intense interest in those who play hard to get, but feel real attachment to those who show emotional stability. Scarcity activates the chase response, but respect activates the bonding response. One excites the ego, the other comforts the nervous system. And over time, the nervous system always wins because humans don't build their lives around adrenaline. They build their lives around safety. When someone knows how to hold boundaries without becoming distant, how to stay warm without becoming needy, and how to be present without becoming possessive, they create an emotional environment where desire grows naturally, not because the other person is afraid of losing them, but because they feel secure being with them. That security becomes magnetic in a world full of emotional chaos. And this is why trying to be rare without being grounded leads to short bursts of attention but not lasting connection. While being respected without trying to impress leads to attraction that deepens quietly over time, the real power is not in making yourself hard to get, it's in making yourself emotionally solid. Because people don't attach to mystery forever, they attach to stability, and stability is what turns interest into something that actually lasts. The way you leave matters more than the way you arrive because the human mind remembers endings more vividly than beginnings, a principle psychologists call the recency effect, where the last emotional impression becomes the strongest memory attached to the entire experience. This means that no matter how powerful the connection felt in the moment, the emotional tone you set as things wind down is what the brain stores as the final truth about how it felt to be with you. If the ending feels rushed, needy, awkward, or emotionally heavy, that feeling quietly overwrites everything that came before it. But if the ending feels calm, confident, and emotionally clean, the mind walks away carrying a sense of satisfaction instead of pressure, and that satisfaction becomes the seed of future desire. This is why people often think they lost attraction for no clear reason, when in reality, nothing went wrong during the interaction, something went wrong in the emotional exit. The subconscious interpreted the ending as a signal of what being close to that person will feel like long term. And the subconscious always prioritizes emotional safety over emotional intensity. When someone leaves a moment with grace, without over explaining, without clinging, without trying to lock in certainty, it communicates self trust and emotional independence. And those traits feel incredibly attractive because they remove emotional burden from the other person. Nobody wants to feel responsible for someone else's emotional stability, but everyone is drawn to someone who clearly owns their own emotional state. This is why confident endings create stronger pull than dramatic beginnings. Because beginnings spark interest, but endings shape memory and memory shapes future behavior. The brain doesn't say that moment was intense. It says that moment felt good to leave, and when leaving feels good, returning feels natural. This is the hidden reason why people feel drawn back to certain presences without being able to explain why. It's not because of what was said or even what was done. It's because of how emotionally clean the separation felt. No pressure, no emotional debt, no unfinished tension, just a calm sense of completeness. And that completeness creates curiosity instead of exhaustion, anticipation instead of relief, and desire instead of distance. Because when someone consistently leaves you feeling lighter instead of heavier, the mind starts associating them with emotional relief. And emotional relief is one of the strongest magnets in human connection, quietly pulling people back again and again without force or effort. Most people think attraction is created by doing more, saying more, impressing more, but real connection is built when someone feels truly seen and emotionally met, not entertained or performed for, because the nervous system doesn't bond to performance, it bonds to presence. Performance creates stimulation, but presence creates grounding. And grounding is what allows trust and attachment to grow without effort. When someone is constantly trying to impress, they unintentionally shift the emotional dynamic into evaluation mode, making the other person feel like an audience instead of a participant. And the moment someone feels like an audience, connection turns into observation rather than experience. Presence works in the opposite direction. It pulls the focus away from what you are doing and places it on how you are being. Calm eye contact, relaxed posture, unhurried energy, and genuine listening send a much stronger signal than clever words or dramatic gestures, because those cues tell the subconscious that it is safe to settle instead of staying alert. People don't fall for perfection. They fall for emotional availability that feels steady and real. This is why someone who is deeply present can feel magnetic without saying much at all, while someone who performs brilliantly can still feel distant. Performance creates admiration, but presence creates intimacy. And intimacy is where attachment quietly forms. When you are fully present, you are not trying to shape the moment. You are allowing the moment to unfold. And that lack of control communicates confidence far more powerfully than any attempt to dominate the interaction. The brain interprets presence as strength because it shows you are not dependent on outcomes. You are comfortable simply being there, and that comfort becomes contagious, making the other person feel more relaxed in their own skin. Over time, this emotional ease becomes what they associate with you, not because you entertained them, but because you regulated the emotional space around them. People remember how safe they felt to be themselves far more than how impressed they were in the moment. And this is why presence always outperforms performance in building real attraction, because performance chases approval, but presence creates connection without chasing anything. It removes pressure from the interaction and replaces it with authenticity. And authenticity is what makes someone feel emotionally close, even in silence. The strongest influence is not in trying to be unforgettable, it is in creating an experience that feels easy to return to. Because when someone feels calm, accepted, and emotionally grounded around you, they don't remember you as impressive. They remember you as meaningful. And meaning is what keeps people drawn back long after the moment has passed. People don't carry memories of moments the way they think they do. They don't replay exact words or specific actions in their mind. They replay the emotional aftertaste those moments left behind because the brain stores feelings more deeply than facts, and that emotional residue becomes the story they tell themselves about the entire experience. This is why two people can go through the same moment and walk away with completely different impressions, not because what happened was different, but because what they felt afterward was different. When someone leaves an interaction feeling calm, valued, and emotionally steady, their mind labels the connection as safe and desirable. But when they leave feeling pressured, uncertain, or emotionally drained, the mind quietly places a warning label on the experience. Even if everything seemed fine on the surface, the subconscious doesn't evaluate experiences logically. It evaluates them emotionally, and the emotion that lasts the longest becomes the final verdict. This is why the minutes after closeness are more powerful than the closeness itself, because that is when the emotional meaning is written. If the atmosphere after feels light and grounded, the memory becomes warm. But if it feels heavy or demanding, the memory becomes tense, and tension slowly erodes attraction even when interest was strong at first. People often say they don't know why they lost feelings, but the real reason is usually emotional fatigue, not emotional failure. The connection started to feel like work instead of ease, and the brain naturally moves away from what feels like effort. This is why the most magnetic people are not the ones who create the biggest emotional highs, but the ones who create the cleanest emotional endings. They leave others feeling better than before, not more responsible, not more obligated, just lighter, and that lightness becomes something the mind wants to return to. Emotional memory works like gravity, pulling people back toward what feels good to carry and away from what feels heavy to hold. And the most powerful way to influence that memory is not through intensity, but through emotional cleanliness, how you manage energy, how you regulate your presence, and how you allow space instead of filling every gap. Because what lasts is never the moment itself. It's the feeling that settles after the moment is over, and that feeling becomes the silent decision maker for whether someone wants to come closer again or slowly step away without ever fully knowing why. Confidence is shown by not needing to cling, chase, or over explain, because real confidence is not loud, it is calm, and calm communicates self trust in a way that words never can. When someone feels secure in themselves, they don't rush to fill silence, they don't try to lock down reassurance, and they don't feel the urge to explain every action just to be understood. And that emotional restraint sends a powerful signal to the subconscious. It says this person is stable, this person is grounded, this person does not need validation to feel whole. And the human brain is naturally drawn to that kind of energy because it reduces emotional pressure. Most people don't realize that over explaining often comes from fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing connection, fear of not being enough. And while that fear is human, it subtly shifts the emotional balance of any interaction. It places the other person in a position of emotional importance instead of emotional equality, and that imbalance creates tension rather than attraction. When someone can stay composed without needing constant feedback, it creates space for the other person to feel safe instead of responsible. Nobody wants to feel like they are being leaned on for emotional stability, but everyone feels drawn to someone who clearly stands on their own. This is why emotional independence feels so magnetic, because it removes obligation from connection. It allows closeness to feel like a choice instead of a duty. And choice always feels more powerful than pressure. When someone doesn't cling, it doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care without losing themselves. And that balance is rare.